What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Goodol'boys channel. So today we're doing some basic maintenance on the Hawk 250. You can see I already have the plastics off. We're going to start by lubing the cables on this thing. We all know that we have one clutch cable and one throttle cable. Those are the only cables on the bike. So you just take some good old-fashioned electrical tape. All I'm doing here really is wrapping this cable up. Now, what you need to do is tape the nozzle of whatever lubricant you're using real close to the cable end here. All right, now what we're going to do is fill the cable until we see the grease coming out of the other end. All right, so this right down in here, you can see the nut threads and then the cable coming out. This is your clutch cable, at least. So when I'm filling this up, you want to fill it until you see grease coming out like you see there. So that's done. And now for the throttle cable here, we have two Phillips head screws here. This is why I grease everything before I put it back on the bike. There it is. If you see screws like this with a Phillips head, take these things and throw them in the trash. So we are running into some bad news here, guys. So this is what's left of my throttle cable. Like I said, literally two strands are holding this thing together. So obviously I'm gonna need a new throttle cable. We got the throttle cable in, came with a bunch of other stuff. Alrighty guys, so these cables are fully extended. You can see on the ends here. So you can see we have exactly the same length cable. The only difference is here is the old cable, which is shorter, and the new cable is couple inches longer, maybe 6 inches longer or something. When I bought all this stuff, I was just wanting the cable, but this just happened to be the entire kit that came with it. I'm not complaining. I didn't pay a penny extra for any of this extra stuff here. It just came with it. And I paid 12 bucks, and you cannot beat that. Guys, I got extremely lucky that this cable fit my bike. There's many different cables. So I'm going to make a video for you guys on how to pick out the correct length and size cable. It'll be linked in the description box below. So if you guys are looking for a clutch or a throttle cable, go check it out. Like I said before, you get two grips. This one here obviously is the throttle grip, which I don't know if this will work. We'll test it quick. Yep, no issues there. So that's kind of nice. We have a spare, and I'm actually almost certain this is the same exact part that came on the Hawk 250. You can see there's some minor differences, but for the most part, it's the same thing. We also got a on and off kill switch, and we also have the throttle mechanism itself if we ever need to change that out. So it's time to put the cable back on the bike, but you guys know the rule. We never put cables on without lubing them. One thing the cable didn't come with is this little rubber boot, but it's simple enough to take it from your old cable, put it on the new cable, and you're pretty much ready to go. Okay, if you've done it right, your slide should be completely closed, and the inside of your carburetor should look like this from the front side where the bolts go. Alrighty guys, so the throttle cable is finished up. Everything's working fine with the original equipment. So this cable will be in the description box below. So I ended up replacing the bolts in the throttle mechanism with a couple Allen head bolts, which I'll show you guys right now. Here's the deal, guys. I found some much better hardware. It is an Allen head, and you can see if you look head to head, these bolts are exactly the same length, thread, everything. The only thing that's different is this is a stainless steel, and it's an Allen head, not a Phillips. So the bolt you're looking for is a M6 by 1, M6 being the size and 1 being the thread pitch, and here is the length. Millimeter. So yeah, there we have it, 22. Next up, we're changing the fork oil. Yeah, so spilled some on the ground. That's what it looks like. Nice and gray. You guys wonder why my hands are dirty all the time. So the oil is drained out. It's time to put this back in it. This is the bolt that came out of it. Now, if you guys look at this washer, it looks a little crushed. It's because it's actually a seal, and they call it a crush washer. You're supposed to replace these, but 99% of the time you can put these right back in there and it'll be just fine. You just obviously want to watch the bottom of your fork and make sure it's not leaking. One thing I forgot to do here, this is the bottom of your bike that's going to be dirty, so you want to take and wipe the bottom of your fork out where the seat of the bolt is going to go. Okay, it looks pretty clean. I'm going to screw it back up in there and re-torque it. A couple ugga-duggas. You guys can see on this bolt, the washer is actually stuck on the bottom of the fork. So that's something you're gonna have to look out for when you're changing your fork oil. You wanna make sure that number one, you have a seal, and number two, make sure it goes back on the bike when you reinstall this bolt. This is where we're at after draining the second shock, so I'm gonna mark it. So next we get to take these sketchy bolts out. These hold the springs down in here, so you want to be extremely careful when you take these out of here. This is where we get to use our new oil. So we're going to pour in the correct amount, which is right about there. And of course I have a funnel. We're going to take our new shock oil and just pour it in here. So the last thing we're gonna do here is clean up around the shock where the seal has gotta go. And then just check your cap, make sure your O-ring is good, give it a good wipe down, and then you can throw it back together. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and actually do the other side off camera to save you guys some time, and we'll keep moving on. Next, we're gonna clean the air filter. Here's the air filter, which by the way, they do make a Canon air filter for these things. So I might possibly be looking into that. So we have 4 more screws to take off. Pop the air filter out of there. So the air filter, plastic piece comes off. This is just what happens. This is standard on any Chinese or Japanese bike. They get dirty. So next we're gonna blow this thing out. Look at all that water down in there. Okay guys, so the airbox draining happens all up under here. So you just get some pliers, twist it off, and why is it not draining? So I ended up getting a drill bit to go up through here. Yeah, the whole problem was it was clogged. So the deal here is this is gonna look this dirty again in like 5 or 10 minutes of riding the bike, because that's just how we ride them. But I suppose I may as well try and get some of the mud out here so it doesn't clog up immediately. Alrighty guys, so that's the final product there. Now it's time to put it back together for good. So when you're done, don't forget to put your cap right back on your airbox. Now it's time to drain the carburetor. So this screw does not need to come all the way out. All you're doing here is allowing the fuel to flow out of this hose here. So that hose comes out between the engine and the swing arm and it drains. And it's good to drain your carburetor every once in a while, and just make sure that there's only gas and not water. So once you let it drain for a minute or two, you're probably good to go. You can tighten your screw back up. You want to snug it down. It doesn't need to be too tight. Next on the list here, check your oil. So basically you have a dipstick on the back of the motor here. You also have a sight glass. I love the sight glass because it allows me to check the oil every time before I ride the bike. When you stand the bike straight up and down, you should be about halfway up the sight glass, which mine has a little extra in there. You can also check it with the dipstick here. What you want to do is get a rag, wipe your dipstick off so it's nice and clean like this. You always check the oil without threading the dipstick in. At least that's how it is on all the Hondas I own, and I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a Honda CG engine. It looks like we're good on oil. Now you guys can see all the dirt around this O-ring and around there, so we need to wipe that stuff off before we put this back in. So we're all cleaned up. I put a dab of oil back on the O-ring. You can also see I cleaned up the seat here. You want to be really careful because it's easy to cross thread these things. And by the way, when you're putting these back in here, they don't need to be super tight because you'll never get it back out again if they are. So just barely snug it up. Alrighty guys, so next maintenance thing here is to go ahead and grease this rear brake. On the back side of this, we can see there's a cotter pin, so I'm going to take that out real quick. Easy. There's also a washer if you put your bike together correctly, or whoever. You've got a spring right here. Use the needle nose pliers again. So we also have to take this connection off back here in order to get the brake off. So now you're going to slide that back. This slides out. Clean up all the points that you need to grease. What we have here is waterproof green grease. This is the best in the game. Grease up this brake lever here. All we're doing here is reassembling this, which is no big deal. So of course we cannot forget these last two top connections here. So all we're gonna do is take some WD-40 Specialist, get them nice and soaked in there. Alrighty guys, so the next step here is going to be to go ahead and bleed the brakes. So first of all, on your brakes, you're going to have a little rubber cap. You need to take that off. This little bleeder valve is an 8mm. Don't use anything else, you'll strip it out. Next, we're going to go ahead and loosen the reservoir screws. Same for the back. Take the cap off of there and crack this guy loose. By the way, this is your rear brake fluid reservoir, and this is your front brake fluid reservoir. Alrighty guys, so I have about 3,000 miles on the bike, or actually almost 3,400 miles. Hopefully you guys can see that. So basically at that point, with this many miles, especially if you're riding off-road, you need to get your brake fluid changed. I've seen on so many Japanese bikes where they have 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 miles on them, and there's nothing but mud and mud water in the calipers and in the brake fluid reservoir. So don't ask me how it happens, but it does happen. So I'll be surprised, honestly, if the Hawks brakes aren't just completely packed full of mud and mud water, but we're about to see. Very simple. It's basically the same thing as bleeding your brakes. So basically somebody pulls the brake in, you loosen the bleeder, fluid comes out, you close the bleeder, the person up here lets off the brake. So as you're doing this, obviously fluid is coming out of the system. So what you want to do is have some DOT3 or DOT4, whatever your bike calls for, and continuously keep filling this reservoir. Obviously it's the same exact procedure on the back of the bike. Alrighty guys, so this is the front brake reservoir. So you're going to take the cap off and notice there's a rubber thing in here. Well, I guess a plastic thing and then a rubber thing. All right, and you can see the fluid is dirty in there, so we do need to replace it. So we have some good old brake fluid. Alrighty guys, so like I said, it's easier with two people, so we have my brother Ryan here helping hammer down on the brakes. Okay, now go up, go down, go up, out everywhere on here. So guys, I think it's a good thing we're changing this oil. I'm not too sure, but I think there was some water in the brake system. So like I said, it's always good to do some maintenance to your bike. All right, here are the back brakes. Now the back brakes look a little bit more dirty. So like I said, for the rear brakes, you have the same thing as the front, but just different shape here. So we have the plastic thing that goes inside of the rubber thing, and that all faces downward, okay? And then we have the cap, of course, and that goes on top of everything. And for the front brake reservoir, so you actually have to put the plastic piece in the rubber piece before you put it all in there. Okay, just like that. Now we can put the actual cap on it there. But these especially, you really need to put some kind of grease or lubricant on, otherwise you will never get them out. And again, these are something that you just barely kind of snug down. So there are a few things to clean up here. We need to take some brake parts cleaner and clean all the oil off of the brakes themselves and everything around it. Same thing with the front brakes here. The last thing we need to do here is actually adjust the valves here. It's been exactly 3,579 miles since I have adjusted the valves last. So you guys saw how easy these came out on time lapse. You can also see there's anti-seize on these. So I swear by lubing everything up. We have 3,580 miles on the bike, and this is what the valve train looks like. So it's very, very clean. As you can see, there's no oil deposits, no browning of the oil. And this is exactly what you want to see. This means you're changing your oil correctly. When you're doing valves, you have to get the engine to top dead center. So what we're going to do here is take the spark plug out. This is the original spark plug for this engine. And this is what our plug looks like. So looks like we're in pretty good shape. So I adjusted the valves. This is what I set the values to. So in the manual, it specifies 0.05 millimeters, which is also happens to be 0.002 inches. So yeah, that's for intake and exhaust. There were no other specifications. Now we need to reinstall the spark plug. So you just want to coat the threads. That's the number one thing. Put some anti-seize on the threads. All right, so the second thing is apply a little bit of dielectric grease to the top of the spark plug here. Just gonna take a little dab, put it on the top. So that's it, guys. The bike is running and operating a whole lot smoother. I want to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Check out that description box below, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Woo!
It's all about humanity.